a story about some of the services that we offer. This morning, Venkat Reddy, who is one of our student consultants, is going to be talking to us about the ADHD and autism service for children and young people. Before we go to you, Venkat, and thanking you in advance for all that you are doing, and Claire, I think, joining you, I just want to put a bit of a call out for something that is happening here today at Fulbourn, which is that we were just talking about the Olympics and all the great joy it's bringing into people's lives at the moment. And we've got our own little version of a games going on here at Fulbourn today. And this is an event that is open to absolutely anybody who would like to come and join us. It starts at 10 a.m. and that's where Scott, our chief executive, is at the moment. He's going to participate in the first event. But there's a whole host of, I'll put inverted commas, sporting events going on. And anybody can take part in them. You don't have to book. There's a prize for the individual who's able to attend the most sessions throughout the day, for both patient and staff member. We've got javelin throwing, seated discus throwing, shot put throwing, penalties in the penalty shootout area, and we're trying to clock up enough miles on a rowing machine to get from Fulbourn. So just a huge amount going on, and it will be, but it's the best of the NHS, being open and inclusive and wanting people to come in, and combining that with actually just trying out something which gets you a bit of exercise as well. So anybody who's in the Fulbourn area, just come along. We can sort of see from where we're sitting all the stuff laid out there for what's going to be a very warm but enormously fun day. So I'm looking forward to popping out there myself after we finish the board meeting. So without further ado, Venkat, Claire, we're in your hands, and as I said at the outset, really grateful to you for coming along to talk to us about what is a hugely important service and a service for which there is, it would seem, ever increasing demand. So Venkat and Claire, over to you.
Thank you very much for inviting Eileen, and hopefully you can hear me and you can see my slide deck we tested. So I am Venkat. I'm a neurodevelopmental pediatrician, has been a consultant in Peterborough for 25 years, and I've been clinical director second time around now for the Children, Young People and Families Directorate. So I'm also joined by Claire, our consultant clinical psychologist and associate clinical director. So we're going to briefly give you some feedback from the families to start with, explain a little bit about what CPFT provides and how we provide with the other partners in the system, talk a little bit about assessments and interventions, and finish up with the recent challenges. I'm sure you're all aware if you read newspapers, and some potential solutions that we already found and we're looking for, and hopefully a couple of minutes for questions. So I will hand it over to Claire, and I will be Chris Whitty, and Claire will tell me next slide and I'll move them forward. Claire.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. I'm Claire, as Venkat explained, clinical psychologist. We're talking today about autism and ADHD, so I'll just briefly give you an explanation of what they are, first of all. So autism is a neurodevelopmental condition that affects how people interact with others, communicate and behave, and it causes impairment. It can cause impairment to their lives. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is a condition marked by ongoing inattention and or hyperactivity and impulsivity that interferes with functioning. Another neurodevelopmental condition that we're not talking about today, but that does overlap significantly, particularly with autism, is learning disability as well. So we are aware that we have long waiting times for assessments and appointments with our service, but when people are in the service, we generally get very good feedback. And we've got some of the comments that we've got from patient surveys earlier in the year. I won't read them out, you can read them yourselves. So the assessment provided to children depends on their age and where they live. So in Peterborough, because it's an integrated service with physical health and mental health services integrated into a single service, the whole age range is covered for autism and ADHD assessments by CPFT services. However, in the rest of Cambridgeshire, physical health services are covered by CCS, and so CCS carries out the autism assessments for younger children. So that's children who are primary school age or before starting school. For ADHD, CCS carry out assessments, but then for medication, primary school children come to CPFT. For secondary age children, for autism and ADHD, assessments are carried out by CPFT. Next slide, Venkat. So I'm going to talk about school age assessments first of all. So ADHD is assessed through getting a detailed developmental history and a standardized computer test called a QB test, as well as getting information from school. And ASD is assessed again with a detailed history and having an observation of a child. We like to have a direct observation, if possible, with a standard observation such as an ADOS, and we get information from school as well, because symptoms for both ADHD and ASD need to be present in more than one setting. So if you have it, it will affect you everywhere. It will affect you at home or at school. Next slide, Venkat. So in terms of interventions, we assess for ASD and ADHD, and when we make a diagnosis, there's a range of interventions that we offer, including the following. So parent education for both ASD in the Signet group and for ADHD in a parents group called the APEG, which explains about ADHD and how to support your child. We offer psychological therapies, including psychoeducation for young people about their condition, and then therapy for any associated mental health conditions alongside. And then we offer medication for ADHD where it's indicated, but it's been in the news a lot recently. Venkat will talk more about the fact there's been a lot of shortages of medication recently. Next slide, Venkat. Over to you.
Thank you. Now I'll talk a little bit about the Peterborough Integrated Neurodevelopmental Service and the preschool autism service. So preschool children are slightly different in the sense they're present very early, anywhere between 18 months onwards. They tend to be generally non-speaking and non-verbal, and they tend to have a lot of associated learning disability and physical health problems as well, like genetic syndrome, Down syndrome, those kind of conditions. And they need a different approach, predominantly delivered by our integrated Peterborough Neurodevelopmental Pathways. As in Peterborough, we CPFT provide health visiting, school nursing, community pediatrics, physiotherapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, as well as camps, all under one roof in the Child Development Center, which is a fantastic custom-built environment. We're able to provide integrated physical health and mental health as an integrated service, which we developed 10 years ago, way before this is the way of thinking, and that now feeds all the way into our Cambridge Children's Hospital that's providing integrated physical health and mental health under one roof, really. And as this, there's been a lot of interest in Peterborough Integrated Neurodevelopmental Model. We had a lot of people researching how we do it and how it benefits, are able to do one assessment taking into account physical health, mental health, autism, ADHD, learning disability, and also use of the digital tools during the COVID to keep it going. So NHS England has commissioned a group of researchers, including me, to look at how does this works compared to other services which are different, where they look for autism, ADHD, learning disability separately. There's a lot of handoffs between mental health services, physical health services, with the children caught in the middle, really. There's a lot of evidence and there's a lot of national and international interest. And only last month, we had a team of clinicians, commissioners, and policy advisors from Singapore come to visit Peterborough Child Development Centre to learn to see how we are doing it here. So now I come to the challenges that what you will be interested in. There's been exponential increase in recognition and referrals. That's really good thing, the recognition. We are not labeling children as a naughty or a bad. We are understanding that we're all different, and our differences sometimes gives us strengths as well as challenges, and we need to address them. One of the biggest challenges has been no lack of dedicated central funding for neurodevelopmental conditions. They tend to sometimes fall between two stools. They're not seen as a physical health conditions. They're not seen as a mental health conditions, but there is no neurodevelopmental investment strategy to we got the miss for the mental health. And recently, COVID caused problems. COVID was actually a catalyst to develop a lot of digital tools and the solutions which we used in Peterborough as well to keep going with the autism and ADHD assessments as interventions, but we couldn't do everything, and some backlog built up we are trying to clear as well. And Claire talked about ADHD medication shortages. That led to a lot of additional clinical work for our teams, swapping available medications from non-available medications, starting, working with our local system of pharmacists and our primary care colleagues to keep children going on ADHD medication. That took up a lot of additional clinical capacity that was rightly diverted away from the assessments. So what have we done and what are we doing as a system and CPFT to address these challenges, really? Even before COVID, we had a very strong autism, ADHD, and LD strategic needs assessment, which is being updated. We had a strategy that was co-produced with children, young people, families, parent care forum, education, health, and social care. Now we're beginning to try to implement that with our mental health, learning disability, autism partnership, with support from a public sector consultancy, try to implement it. Unfortunately, funding constraints make it very difficult to make big inroads into the waiting times and the waiting lists at the moment. Nationally, it has been recognized that we need to do something different. We can't carry on. There is a national multi-sector ADHD task force that's education, health, social care, voluntary sector, looking at everything, the NICE guidance, how we're implementing it. Do we need a lot more digital solutions, a lot more non-drug therapies and support for the families, and also this concept of waiting for the diagnosis before we do anything. That doesn't work really, and we need to get in early as soon as a need is identified and provide needs-led support for the child and the parent and the family across education, in the community, and at home as well. And same thing with the community pediatrics and speech and language therapy waiting list nationally. Those are the two longest waiting lists for community health services. And there is a clinical working group looking at how we can address them really, I think. And any digital solutions that can take off our administrative burden, give the clinicians more time to spend with the families and the children would be useful as well. Unfortunately, despite all these attempts, we got around 1,700 children between community pediatrics and the camps waiting for assessment at the moment. Average waiting time is about 20 to 25, but unfortunately, the longest waits are about 80 weeks for the camps and about 50 weeks for the community pediatrics. So I think I come to the last slide. I'll summarize it really. This is our Child Development Center with the fantastic facilities. So in summary, autism, ADHD with all of the co-occurring condition is a big problem for children, and it affects the whole family. It can affect the health, well-being, development, educational function, and able to access community facilities. We are trying our best to address this recent exponential increase in demand for our services by, especially in Peterborough, able to develop an integrated physical health and mental health one-stop service, and which which improves the time to diagnosis, time needed to diagnosis, and able to provide better user experience. I'll stop at that. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you so much. Really helpful, hugely informative. And I do know, in terms of having spoken to service users and those that care for them, just how valued the services are that you provide, and the quality is never in any doubt. But being able to meet the demand is most certainly a challenge for all of you. So thank you for what you're trying to do. Let's open this up to any questions. I'll go first in the room, and then if anybody wants to raise their hands who's attending virtually, please do so. But anybody here in the room? And Mike, let's start with you.
Yeah, thank you, Claire. Interesting. So from a clinical point of view, I'm sort of interested in what are the consequences for delay in diagnosis and treatment, given that some people I see it as a GP in terms of frustration and sometimes anger at the, nothing's happening. But I just wondered, from a clinical, neurodevelopmental or social or educational perspective, what are the consequences and risks that we're holding because we're not seeing people quick enough?
I will start and Claire can come in. First and foremost, like it's always the child we think about the first and the family second, as you can imagine, or as a family unit. So child's development is, they have got some very critical stages, especially early on in the first 1,000 days as you go along. And if we're not intervening early enough, we actually miss the chance to make the best use of our intervention. So, for example, speech and language, OT interventions for a child who is not talking, getting in at 18 months to 2 years is really critical. And as we get older, if we do not manage these conditions and support them early, there is always a risk of secondary conditions, the anxiety and depression, school exclusion, and parent not able to sleep, and parental mental health. There's a huge consequences apart from parents seeking private diagnosis, which is not always of great quality. Then we have to reassess. So there's so much of social, educational, economic, and societal consequences. And especially if you look at ADHD and the secondary consequences to road traffic accident and offending behavior, it's huge, really. There's so much of evidence for public health, financial evidence for investment to save a lot of money very, very quickly across education, health, and social care.
Super. Claire, did you want to come in to add anything to that?
I think Venkat's covered it. I would just second what he said. I particularly work with secondary age children, and just thinking about the school problems and social problems it causes when people have to wait for a diagnosis.
Thank you. For me, it's very important to understand those consequences and not just focus on the numbers on the waiting list and the time that they wait. So I appreciate your answer.
Just a more concrete example, Mike, is that one of the reasons we haven't invested too much in autism interventions, especially for children who are not talking, who could be learning disabled, is that it was seen as there is no evidence-based intervention that makes a difference. But there's been very clearly, if you identify it around 18 months, you don't need to diagnose it. You can say that there is an atypical social communication. There is an app where the parents can use it, can identify very quickly. And you actually, all you do is to video the child and the parent playing together. Then you coach the parent to interact, communicate, and socialize with the child in a different way, which can be done digitally. It's about 6 to 8 sessions. And that increases number of children who can speak, number of children who can go to mainstream school. And every dollar invested at 18 months saves about $5 by the time they get to 5 or 6.
Yeah.
That's brilliant, Venkat, and very powerful statistics. Because we need to remember, at the end of the day, these are all about real children, real families, and the impacts are enormous on them, and indeed those in schools as well. So we should think about that. Claire, did you want to come in?
Am I allowed to ask a question?
Of course, Claire.
Yeah, thank you. I'd really like to know a little bit more about the nature of the collaboration with the educational services. On what level? How does it work in practice? If you could say a little more about that, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Very, very happy to, Claire. As you can imagine, preschool, most of the children are identified by our health visiting service in the nursery. But a lot of school-age children, because they spend a lot of time with other children, and a lot of these problems are magnified, we're also putting pressure on the ability to concentrate and behave and do what school asks them to do. They're put under a lot of pressure, so they can manifest first in the school setting, even though family is coping really well. So that's very much integral to the school-age neurodevelopmental pathway. At the moment, almost 95% of referrals come from the schools. There is actually a lot of training, and the pathways are developed together. There's a lot of training going into schools as well to support everyone in the school setting to provide the right support for children with the neurodevelopmental conditions. Actually, we won a bid for a pilot project from NHS England, where we are recruiting a group of primary schools and providing them a structured training and support to provide better needs-led support for neurodevelopmental conditions. It's called the PINS project. We got the project manager. Schools are all, they're self-selected. They've done the baseline of what they're doing well, what they want to help with. It's called the Project for Inclusion in Neurodevelopmental Conditions in Schools. So, and also we've done some pilots before where training the school staff, like specialist teachers, educational psychologists, and able to identify and help with assessments and intervention that increases the pool of professionals who can help with this. Without schools, we can't do anything. And actually, education and social care has lot more burden placed on them by delayed health diagnosis. I mean, it's not a health condition. It is a education, health, and social care condition, and we need to work together really.
Thanks
Very much.
Any other questions here in the room? Venkat or Claire? Steve?
Yeah, thank you, Claire. Really helpful presentation, really interesting. On the slide showing some of the steps that you're taking at the bottom, it said digital solutions. Just wondered if you could say a little bit more about what those solutions are.
Yeah. I think internationally at the moment, especially even in high-income countries, we have nowhere near enough professionals to be able to cope with the assessments or the interventions. Anything that reduces the burden on the families and the schools, initially to gather the information. So, for example, having a simple app where the parents can put in all the concerns, school can add in the element of it, and we have a lot of information available to me as a clinician before they come to see me. That will cut my clinic time by 30 to 40 minutes just having that information. That's first thing. And for example, and also a lot of the assessments can take we've done a time and motion study. An average autism assessment from the beginning to end can take up to 12 hours of clinical time. So cutting down the administrative burden in the first one. Second one we're about to hopefully trial is ambient AI technology, where we have an app, we put it on the table. I talk to the family, looking at them, not looking at the screen, and the AI will live transcribe it and turn that into a note for the system one and a letter to the family in a way they can understand it, and a letter to the clinicians in the way we're used to doing them. Hopefully that will cut some time. There's been a use of artificial intelligence where it will use the algorithm to analyze the screening tools, which are really, really useful to rule out autism based on the facial expressions, communication. You can do a 2-minute video, and you can identify using artificial intelligence who are the high risk and the low risk. And we're one of the first ones to use QB test about 8 years ago, which is actually objective assessment of inattention, hyperactivity, impulsivity. Child sits in front of computer for 20 minutes, plays a game. At the end of it, it will tell you, compared to other 7-year-old boys, where they sit in the attention, activity, and impulsivity. Now, after 10 years, that's being used in about 80% of services and about to be approved by NICE at the moment. We've been very, very early into those things, really.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Can
That's
I
great.
can I add?
Yes, please
Sorry.
do, Claire.
We're also looking at a new program that's being brought out by a company that's developed a psychoeducation and management program for young people and for parents for children who've got ADHD, and we're just looking into buying a license for that at the moment as well. And that's only been used so far by a few CAMS services in the country, and it's currently being researched, but it looks as if it would be a good way forward as well.
Is anything else you want to add about anything else I've been talking about?
No, that's good. Thank you.
No.
Just the last bit, one of the things that is helping us, it's called Insights, which is innovation sites, and we get early look at all this digital technology. Emily Faulkner, Kathy Walsh, myself, we look at them and pick up the ones we can trial very, very early and also co-develop them as well. So we get a very, very early look at them.
That's excellent, Venkat and Claire. And we are a trust that is renowned for our research and innovation, and the more that we can do in an area such as this, because although we are wrestling with huge levels of demand, important to note that this is a national issue. Indeed, it's an international issue, isn't it, in terms of demand. So if technology can help in making sure that your time is given to the most important work, then it's got to be good news, really. So we look forward to more developments there. Any more questions at all before we say a huge thank you to Venkat and Claire for taking time to speak to us? Well, huge thanks again to you both. It's been really interesting, and we've learned a lot. It's very thought-provoking, and let's hope that we can just push ahead to be able to see even more of the people who we know are waiting too long, because I know that that's what concerns both of you a huge amount, as it does the rest of the world. So thank you again. Lovely.
Thank you.
Right, bye now. Fantastic. All right, so into the main body of the meeting. We took that for a little bit longer, but I think it was important to do so because it is such a critically important area, the work that we do, and matters to so many people. So if we go to the apologies for absence. So note that we've got apologies from Karen Daver, who is on leave, from Kathy Walsh, who's also on leave, and also from Jane Cannon, who's dealing with some family. So 3 apologies. I haven't been made aware of any others, but if anybody wants to tell me that there are any. Nope. Natalie, who's that?
Yes, we've got apologies from Kathy Walsh.
Yes, I've done that one there.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear that one. Apologies.
Okay, thank you. So declarations of interest. I think we've got one that I know of anyway. Mike?
Yes, so just for the record, I have let Natalie know, but I've been appointed as interim chair of Cambridge Global Health Partners. I don't think it will present any conflicts of interest here, but I felt I ought to put it on.
I just want to say what it does.
So Cambridge Global Health Partners is an organisation associated with Admiral's Charitable Trust, and it builds relationships between healthcare professionals in this country and healthcare professionals and services in low and middle income countries for mutual benefit. So they benefit from our expertise, and our staff benefit from seeing how healthcare is provided in low and middle income countries such as Botswana, Kenya, digital link with Myanmar, and such like. So that's what we do. Not without its risks. We've got some people in Kenya at the moment, and the riots and stuff in Kenya so it's an interesting project, but very beneficial, I think, for us and for international development.
Okay. Well, I don't perceive that there's any conflict, and thank you for doing it for the sort of greater good, and for Cambridge to be associated with such a good greater good, I think. So thank you, Mike. So if we go to the minutes of the last meeting, I'm just going to go through for accuracy. Page 1. Page 2. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. We can agree that they're accurate. Anything that anybody wants to raise from them that isn't going to be covered elsewhere in the meeting today? In which case we'll say big thank you for the minutes and agree those. In terms of the action log, I couldn't see any actions outstanding. Good. And I haven't been notified of any other business, but has anybody discovered an appetite for any since I was last notified there was any? Okay, so we'll say no. Fabulous. All right. Well, that takes you to my report, which I'm going to take that everybody's read it. Just a couple of things that I want to draw out. I want to particularly welcome our new cohort and returning cohort of governors. We completed elections for governors just a couple of weeks ago, and it is delightful to see so many of you online with us today. So you are hugely welcome. We had a session last night for new and returning governors, which I found really a cause for optimism that so many people of such commitment and high caliber want to be governors and play a part in the effective governance and oversight of CPFT. So thank you all for that. Hugely appreciated. And the other thing I would draw out, because it is critically important to us, is that we were able to announce this week the appointment of a new chief executive, a substantive appointment to take over for the lovely man who's here on my right, who's our stalwart interim chief exec, Scott. Scott will be with us, just to reassure everybody, for a good many more months. But we will, from the 1st of October, have Steve Grange joining us, who is currently the Deputy Chief Executive at the Midlands Partnership University Trust. Many of you will have been involved in the process of recruiting a Chief Executive, and I want to take the opportunity to thank everybody who was involved, and in particular, the hundreds of staff of CPFT who made a positive contribution to that process in terms of taking part in events to help scope what we all felt was important that a chief executive would bring to us, taking the time to share with me particular insights, or indeed taking part in stakeholder panels that candidates participated in. So it was a real team effort from everybody in CPFT. And I was delighted that Steve came through what was quite a decathlon of processes to get the gold medal, to triumph. And for that appointment to be so universally welcomed by the staff who had met him and had the chance to engage with him. And those who hadn't met him, to be absolutely delighted that someone was coming to us with a background in the sorts of health and care that we undertake, and whose commitment to seeking improvement, seeking opportunities to be a great and effective system player are proven and tested in a trust that does very similar work to ours. It's about twice the size of CPFT, so he's used to working at scale. He certainly doesn't lack for ambition, and he cares deeply about better serving communities and people, and to forging really productive and good and supportive relationships with staff, which at the end of the day seems to me to describe what you want a good and effective chief executive in health and care to bring to you. So we are really looking forward to and are excited to have Steve joining us from the 1st of October. Grateful to his current trust for allowing him to come to us relatively quickly. But also hugely grateful to Scott, who is beside me. He's not going anywhere quickly, so we'll have plenty of chances to embarrass him in coming months. But Scott continues to be at the helm. We are enormously grateful to you, Scott, for me. So I will stop at that point. Happy to take any questions if there are any, but otherwise we'll hand on to Scott for Chief Executive's update. Mike.
I'd quite like to put on record our thanks to you and Steve for putting in that process. So I thought I think it should be noted, and it was, I thought, incredibly rigorous and effective, and obviously produced a good outcome. So I don't want to spare your blushes, but I just wanted to say. And Steve.
The candidates felt the good.
Feedback from Steve that he had to put rain on ice
Yeah.
on a Saturday morning following the
But
last day.
But that is good training for being our chief executive.
Yes, absolutely.
Doing a decathlon, a marathon, and then a sprint all combined. We've created a very special Olympic event. But anyway, thank you for that, Mike. That was really generous of you. And while we're thanking people, we should thank not just Stephen, but also his team who worked so hard to make sure that we could deliver the games, if you like, on recruiting. So I promise no more Olympics for me. So Scott, over to you.
Thank you, Eileen. I'll assume you've had the opportunity to read the paper, just to call it a couple of additional points on one or two of the items. So I make mention of the Compassionate Leader and the Compassionate Manager programme. I also took part personally in the Compassion in Action kick-off session on Monday of this week. And I would absolutely commend it to everybody. It's a very humbling experience. It gives you a significant insight to the importance of compassion, and it's clearly underpinned by what we're trying to do in terms of ensuring that our trust values are genuinely lived and kept alive, rather than just being respected as you walk past them on the wall. So I would certainly encourage board colleagues, non-execs as well as execs, if you can find the time to get involved in the programmes. It's really worthwhile. And the second point about CQC, I'm aware of CQC, in the media a lot. We've had some further engagement with CQC, but I was going to defer to Rachel, because I gather we had a relationship conversation with them again during the early part of the week. But do you want to just give a general update, Rachel?
Yeah, so from CQC point of view, we had, as Scott said, we had a relationship meeting with them I think two weeks ago, which was very helpful. This was the first one that we've had with the new new staff in place and under the new framework. We are still awaiting our final report for our inspection of our inpatient wards, and CQC are still gathering the evidence in terms of our community teams, and that's where we're at the moment.
So it's business as usual, in a sense, notwithstanding the fact that CQC are going through a lot of challenges themselves at the moment. Thanks for that.
Can I just check? Can everybody hear? Because I'm just checking that online people can hear. Okay. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Marvellous. Thank you. Off you go.
Okay, then on the stakeholder engagement, as the note said, we have extended the invitation to the recently appointed. We've had a couple of positive responses, so we're looking to programme those in due course. Obviously, depending on time, we'll try and make sure that Steve can get involved as well, Steve Grange. But as and when we've got some updates, share those with you. And then lastly, on the section to do with the culture of care, I don't know if anyone's got an update on where we are with the pilot, but I certainly, in terms of the learning disability, mental health, learning disability and autism, EBU, we had a very good discussion on a whole range of issues, of which culture of care clearly is a thread that runs through. So I chaired my first board yesterday, and there's a significant agenda that's coming out of that. But not only will reinforce the importance of CPFT's sense of leadership and oversight of the EBU itself, but specifically related to the pathways of care, working with partners across the wider system within the scope of the EBU and its remit. So again, we'll keep you updated on that. But does anybody have any update on the culture of care? I will.
Yeah, yes, I do. I attended the workshop yesterday, which was the first QI workshop with the national team. It's very well attended. We had the Sun Network and possibility of president of the 4 wards in the president.
So network is
It's a service. Sorry,
service users.
service user network. Yeah.
Because there was some representative of EBU yesterday who did a great piece to remind us that's what it stands for.
Yes, absolutely. Very well attended in a very hot room in Huntingdon Town Hall. But it was, a great day. Well, it was morning. So very much explaining the purpose of the cultural care and the QI process. And day 2 is next week.
Great. Thank you. And that was the confusion. I thought yesterday was a CQC catch up, not the
No, that was a
precaution care policy. So at that, I'll stop, but again, happy to take any questions or anything in the report or any other matter, any other issue with that matter.
Note in the chat that Nora is agreeing that compassion and action training is well worth doing, so that's fabulous. Any questions at all? Steve?
It was just a comment. It's great that we've heard back from a couple of MPs.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll hear back from all. And the opportunity there with the review of the hospitals programme to make the case for the children's hospital through that dialogue with MPs, with our partners. Right, we can hopefully talk directly to MPs to help with that.
I think that would be something that would be pretty high on the agenda. Thanks, Steve.
Okay, in which case, shall we move along? Scott, staying with you.
Yeah.
Board assurance framework.
Caroline's absence, I'll front this up. So this is the update to the board assurance framework. As colleagues are well aware, the board assurance framework is largely the more strategic orientated risks. So as an exec team, we review this on a monthly basis just to make sure that it remains live. We don't expect the strategic risks that either the sense of or scale of risk or indeed the mitigation is going to change dramatically from day to day in the same way as one might from more of an operational risk register perspective. But what this update provides is, again, reflections of the risk owners across the core 9 areas and risks that are identified. Hopefully those are self-explanatory. I'm sure myself and colleagues will be more happy to add to any questions related to the updates specifically.
So can I just ask a question and I'll draw other colleagues in? So it's good to see the articulation of strategic risk, but I'm looking at your target risk scores across the board, which all see substantial drops and substantial drops by March next year. And given that some of these are not just for us, but across the piece, really hard things to do, like recruiting and retaining more people. I'm just sort of doing a slight reality check as to whether this is overly ambitious and whether it needs a bit of reality check.
I think with hindsight, we probably they were said to be particularly demanding and ambitious targets. But given that, as I say, some of these issues don't change dramatically or very quickly, the fact that we are where we are in terms of even the mitigated risks that have been updated, you're right, they probably are unachievable, dare I say. So we'll go back and make sure that those are moderated.
Anybody have any questions, observations? Brian?
I support your suggestion. I think the question I would also have is that we have set ourselves the targets that we had in terms of it to try to achieve, notwithstanding that we might need to do a reality check on what the targets may need to be revised to. Happy that we're taking all the steps that we can to get to what that target might have been.
Yeah.
And give us your response next time, maybe.
Okay.
That's the easiest way to do it rather than put you on the spot now.
I think it's again a fair challenge, Brian. I think if we're candid, in order to mitigate, and at the time where we set out what we need to do to mitigate, we might have been in a less constrained financially environment than we are today. So therefore, you're right. On that basis alone, we should be looking at what we need. So yes, this is all. We'll make sure that.
Becky.
Mine's on the back of this question as well. On the each table, it shows the risk movement, and most of them say no movement. Can you just remind me what no movement?
That's really between the risk score as per last review and this. What tends to happen is to say they don't change dramatically, from month to month, but the narrative can be updated to hopefully give a sense of progress and oversight. That they're not just picking these things off the shelf. Leading into more of a rigorous process. Doing this collectively, because we tend to do it more often than not as individuals, just to kind of share that sense of insight. What might also be helpful if we share that sense of responsibility to one's got a defined name.
Yeah.
But it's largely looking at what the score was last time, score is now.
Okay, I think we've had this conversation a number of times that the board assurance framework does need some work, and it should be a collective piece of work across the executive, not an individual sport. It's about strategic risks, and you are charged delivering strategic improvement. So I think a slightly longer discussion on that next time we meet would be good. Stephen.
Thanks, Eileen. I mean, I think the board and the exec have got an opportunity to sign off the bus operational plan actually to sort of go back and sort of review against the plan for 24-25 anyway. I mean, I think the other bit that sometimes we miss is that dynamic between the BAF and then the operational risks. And certainly at the People and Culture Committee, we were talking about sort of drawing out some of the operational risks and actually sort of closing some of those in the context of when we review the BAF and its impact. So again, we may want to think about how we're articulating that going forwards as well.
Oh, Brian.
So I just wonder again, part of the triangulation, to reply to the earlier questions, if we're signing off the business plan, to the extent that the business plan is going to address some questions that are in here, it's worth doing that triangulation. So I support that.
All right, so we've got a way forward, and I think, as I've said before, in a number of forums, the board assurance framework does need to be treated as live and important document. It's really just a bit repetitive at the moment. Okay, shall we move on then to the first of our board reports, which is the Quality and Safety Committee report. Rachel, you're providing the report today on behalf of Karen.
Yes.
So thank you for that.
Yeah. Okay, so take the paper as read. There are no escalations to the board. Of note, though, is the ongoing progress with you've just been talking about BAF and all, but with the risk register. So just to explain, there was an audit in January this year, and that provided a very good framework for further development, and noted very important that improvement does continue. Also, would like to advise the board that the way we are recording restrictive interventions on System 1 has enabled us to become compliant with the Use of Force Act, and also meets our PQEF requirements. That's the Parent Carer Race Equality Framework, which is a really important. So we're bringing these aspects
Patient
together.
care, isn't it? Not parent.
Patient.
Yes, patient care.
Patient care. Sorry. Yes. Sorry. And then just to highlight, in June, the Trust held its first quarterly Lessons in Practice forum with a focus on transitions in care for children and young people. It was very well attended, with over 100 staff, and the feedback was very positive. I'm happy to say more questions.
Mike, and then Brian.
Yeah, so that's right. The only thing I would expand on is also a detailed thing, but we had an internal audit on medicines management, and to close the loop, I raised it last time because I was worried what were the quality implications. We had a very good presentation by the chief pharmacist, whose name Andrea. Yeah, I forget. And I think that assured us that the various issues that they raised around controlled drug recording, fridge temperatures, and one other issue was addressed and is being addressed properly. But so I thought that was a good example of how internal audit fed into quality and safety, and then sort of closed that loop. And the only other issue is around group A strep infection, which we had assurance that was being looked into and dealt with. I think it's very important when it comes to infection prevention and control in this organisation, which was helpful.
Right.
Good comment. Really, I was pleased to see that the number of reasonable assurances was up in June over May. So I might take an accountant's eye of just counting up. Maybe our partials versus our reasonables. So that it's always disappointing when someone also going backwards. So I think it's seeking very much to progress if that's easy to say, but that's been delivered. So let's see it moving in the right direction.
You got any thoughts on that, Rachel?
I think they have improved it more in the July meeting as well. But I think I think the challenge that we have with the meetings is sometimes, probably Mike can, it's the interpretation of those partial, reasonable. So I personally, I think there needs to be more work in terms of there's a little consistency in approach.
And that's the point well made, because they are highly subjective.
I did ask if there's an evidence base to them.
Eventually, they are highly subjective. So you change the number of people in or the composition of the committee, you'll probably get a completely different set of scores on the doors coming out. So I think we need to challenge ourselves a bit more with definitions, possibly. David, we're trying to speak up as much as we can. Look like you were straining to hear us, so doing our best. Scott, can I just ask you before we go into the quality report? There's been some press around Microsoft having yet another issue yesterday, and I was just wondering whether that had impacted any of our patient care, safety issues, anything at all. Looking between Holly and Rachel and anybody.
I'd love to
Yeah,
know
no
from
worries.
a technology point of view. Do you want?
I'm happy to
Yeah.
take that. So yes, we were impacted, and you'll have to forgive me for not being terribly technical, but it was a platform that was globally affected, that actually meant that for some of our teams' call-in groups, they were no longer receiving calls. So it was escalated very quickly. We held an operational meeting to understand which services were affected. We had roughly 20 services affected in terms of not being able to receive calls through their calling groups. The one that we were most concerned about was our first response service for mental illness, so the 111 option 2. However, with the thanks of Richard and Lauren's team, we moved on to another platform. So we probably had about 40 minutes where we weren't able to receive calls, but put a different solution in place. So currently, we remain on that alternative platform because there are still global issues. Or is it just lovely? Good. So calls were able to be received. We did have a second meeting, and I did ask for Rachel's advice because in the alternative platform, 2 functions that are normally available weren't available. Those were around call recording and also monitoring queue length. And again, particularly relevant for our first response service. However, we made the decision that as long as the calls could be answered and we could get to the people phoning us who were in need, that we gave instructions for staff to take additional notes to make up for call recording. And we notified the ICB so that they could liaise with 111 so that we could get a verbal update if queues were forming.
Well, it sounds like you were working to do your very best against challenging circumstances. I know the Microsoft share price has gone down in the last 24 hours. Fiona, did you want to come in?
If I may, please, some of you know that I work to represent the voluntary sector, but as it happens, I'm also chair of Lifecraft, and I'm very aware that they run Lifeline, and I'm just wanting to sort of check that, hearing with the problems with the 111, is it that CPFT are quite quick to link with our Lifecraft and Lifeline colleagues to sort of, you know, connect, approach up, because otherwise they may not realise that demand for them may increase quite dramatically and may not know why, and may be able, especially if it, you know, if they can help over a few days to work out how to, you know, maybe pick up some of that capacity.
That's a good point, Fiona.
Yeah, it's a very good point. I mean, Fiona, one of the things that these incidents tend to force us to do, but rightfully so, is reflect our business continuity plans. So as Holly said, it was, to all intents and purposes, we lost access to a couple of our services for about half an hour, 40 minutes. So we didn't need to declare a full major incident, but nonetheless, we still did look at the business continuity plan. So I know that our emergency planning team are looking at those again to play through what that scenario might have meant should we had to declare a major incident. And I'm probably doing you and colleagues a disservice by saying I don't think it's in there at all, but it should be, to be thoughtful about the impact that that kind of event might have on partners. But we'll certainly take it away and make sure that it is reflected and that we do, if nothing else, in the courtesy, alert partners and colleagues to the likely impact.
That's a conversation outside.
Yeah,
I think it would be
yeah.
useful, Fiona, if that's okay with you. Catherine, do you want to come in?
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to add, Fiona, just on a purely service-based level, I know that FRS service leads are in contact routinely with Lifecraft because of the interlinks between those services. So that at ground level, those links are absolutely in place.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Catherine. Back to you, Rachel, for the actual policy report.
Thank you. So once again, take the report as read. We'd like to highlight 3 issues. One is that we've seen a sustained increase in the seclusion above the mean for the last several months. The data reflects episodes of seclusion as opposed to the length of seclusion. So these can often be very short periods of seclusion. In June, there was one young person who'd had a series of very short episodes of segregation, which accounted for most of the incidents within that month. The decision was, and that decision for segregation was made in collaboration with the NDT. It's worth highlighting. That's quite a rare situation. In terms of the seclusion, that data has been looked at, and the data over the last 6 months has been reviewed in detail, and it seems to be that there doesn't seem any absolute cause for this. It's a fluctuation. Also, in terms of our falls per 1,000 bed days, this is also slightly above the mean for June. That data has been reviewed, and you read in the report. There are 2 moderate harms. Both of those have been reviewed, and there's been no revisions. And then finally, I would just like to undertake the work that's taking place regarding getting our policies, outstanding policies up to date. The policy working group has been repurposed into a policy tracking group of a far smaller number of staff. The number of outstanding policies have reduced by 1/3 now since May. All outstanding policy owners have been contacted to prioritise getting the policies updated, and we've seen obviously clear movement within that already. We've also looked at the ratification process, and that's been streamlined, but whilst also ensuring that we maintain robust governance. What's been important is that often what we've realised is that people have been waiting for committees to take place as opposed to actually engaging people virtually and taking chairs to organise this virtually, which is obviously streamlining it very quickly, which is great. I have to say enormous thanks to Chris Turner for this. And this is the tracking meeting is happening weekly.
Thank you for that, Rachel. Brilliant to hear. Could you just explain a little bit about what seclusion actually means?
So seclusion is where a person who will be having difficulties from challenges within the environment, the inpatient environment, and it's in terms of restrictive practice, it's the last clinical intervention that will be taken. So you're removing them from the area they're in. We do have a seclusion room in the front, but it might be removing them sometimes to their bedrooms as well. And it's really about de-escalation.
But with great levels of wraparound care.
Absolutely, and debrief after.
Thank you for that. Never easy decisions, I'm sure. Mike.
So it's on that point, actually, that's a formative moment again. So do we monitor the use of deprivation of liberty dolls in the organisation? I've not seen that data. I'm presuming the
Yes,
solution
that's-
is or is not. I don't know. It's not. No.
No, and the declaration of that's under our mental health law. So all the clerk brings those. That comes to quality committee. I think it's
Next month. I've not seen enough quality committee. I'm not with.
No.
We give an update because properly. So that you have all.
It's interesting. So seclusion doesn't fall under that legislation. Right. Thank you.
Any other questions on this very rich pack of information that Rachel presented? Well, let's applaud where improvement is happening. That's great. And but also applaud where you know about it and something you've done. Thank you, Rachel. I'm hoping that Pri is with us to
Yes.
is the People and Culture Committee report. Pri?
Thank you. Can I just check you can hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, it's fine. Perfect.
Thank you, Eileen. I will take the report as read. I think if I had to summarise where we are in terms of people and culture, our overarching challenge is definitely around resourcing, but I'll just go through the points that we wanted to raise here. The first is the risk around our ability to deliver the mandatory clinical training that we need to, and the skills session as well. And that risk relates very much to the vacancies that we're holding. There is also a risk around our compliance with the CQC Regulation 18, and that requires that as a trust we have sufficient appropriately qualified and experienced staff to actually deliver the service that our patients and service users require. And the other risk, excuse me, that I really wanted to highlight from the meeting that we held was about our appraisal completion rate. We know it's increased slightly recently, and Stephen in his update may be able to give a slightly more recent figure. In terms of advice, turnover has improved slightly. I don't think enough to worry too much either way. The mandatory training has increased, though we are still below our target level, and we know staff are aware of this, and in particular the line managers. I guess all things are important, but if we're pushing, we're probably pushing to make sure that supervisions and appraisals are up to date. The vacancies are also creating concerns for us in terms of staff wellbeing. We are aware of it and are working on it. And I know one of the challenges and one of the pushbacks we've had is around how we've presented the vacancy control panel. So we know that we're working on just making sure that across the trust staff understand how it works and the purpose of it, because clearly it's important as well, but we don't want it to hamstring us too much. I think Rachel mentioned earlier the PCREF, the Patient and Carer Race Equality Framework. It is mandatory work, but we just need to make sure we've got the right resourcing in place to be able to complete it. And we have discussed in a couple of meetings the consultant job planning, where we're going to need to work to improve that completion rate. In terms of assurance for here, we've launched a digital staff handbook. The Wellbeing Staff Support Hub, it's been really well, the support they've provided has been very well received so far. And Freedom to Speak Up are also doing a fabulous job to encourage staff to continue to speak up where they raise challenges. And one thing I would like to end with is just to say, we did end the meeting by saying, obviously part of our remit, or a big part of our remit as a committee, is to make sure we raise issues that we need to be aware of and be concerned about, but we also really wanted to recognise the enormous amount of really good work that's done across the trust to support people, and sometimes people are working in slightly more challenging circumstances than we might wish, so we did just want to say a thank you as well. And I will stop there. Thanks, Eileen.
Thank you very much, Pri. So any questions or observations, Pri?
Can I pick up 2 points from the equality, diversity and inclusion aspect of the report? First is the point that Pri made about the patient carer race equality framework and the need to get some focus and some resource around that. So we discussed that again yesterday at the exec team. Ahead of that, Shan Guilfoyle is on leave at the moment. Shan comes back I'll liaise with Sharon to work through how we take the job description that we already have for the role, make sure it does accurately reflect that sense of mandation around introducing Claire, and we'll get that role filled as quickly as possible. And the other thing just to draw to your attention is the last couple of points, the third and bottom, second bottom point on the same slide, and to talk about the Recovery College. So again, we're looking at the number of graduates that we've got going through the Recovery College, the peer support worker programme, and looking to make sure that we can redouble our efforts to find roles within CPFT and indeed across partner organisations where people with lived experience can actually find a way of not only sharing that lived experience with colleagues, but also, in a sense, kind of resetting themselves in terms of their career ambitions. So we're picking that up with Sharon and them and the team. And then related to that, the Waiting Well pilot, which is written almost a little kind of afterthought. This was quite a significant, not profound piece of work that was done, again, through the Recovery College in dealing with people on the class waiting list and intervening to the extent that people thereafter felt they didn't need to be on the waiting list because they got a sense of support. So it was written up, it was undertaken as a pilot with a bit of additional support. What we're now looking to do is make sure that we maintain that level of support, but also writing it up as a, almost like a practical research example of where we can use that resource more effectively. So we'll probably bring that back through.
Can I just get you, for the benefit of those that don't know about the Recovery College, to just explain what it is?
Right, okay. I don't remember the name of the organisation whose learning we adapted for the Recovery College. But what the Recovery College in essence does is it takes people who have got a sense of lived experience from mental health challenges and try and help them gain a sense of personal well-being, personal standing, and also to prepare themselves for moving back into employment more than anything. It's a fantastic, and I can't remember, can anyone else remember how many colleagues we had already, individuals we had gone through, Steve? It was a huge number.
Yeah, it's going through, but we've currently employed 43 people.
So it's not intended to be a directly therapeutic environment as such. It is more about the individual and just giving them a kind of sense of self-confidence again. And you may have heard me say this before, and one of the things we'll be looking to try and do is, there used to be an annual graduation from the college itself. It's incredibly emotional when you hear people's stories. Part of the graduation process and part of the Recovery College process is about people recognising the challenges that they've faced and the origins of those challenges, and then sharing that with you, which in a sense builds its own self-confidence. But maybe as a development type thing, we could ask team to come and share with colleagues who have not been involved with it. As I say, it's very heartwarming as well as obviously the deep kind of environment for a lot of people.
Perfect. Any questions on what Pri was talking about? We will go into Stephen's report in just a second.
I hope you don't mind, but the only additional thing at the last meeting, which is not reported here because it was very recently, you're probably going to say it. Even do you want to say? I was just the junior doctor strike was handled well, but I'm stealing your thunder. I'm so sorry.
No, you carry on. Mike.
Right. Okay, well, we'll come back to that. Jackie.
And similar to Mike, again, we had a meeting only last week, so it's not in this, but we did discuss having line of sight of the impact of any employment legislation that is going to change as a result of the new government.
Yeah.
Okie dokie. So Stephen and possibly Catherine can help you with this. In your report, I'd like you to draw out some attention to appraisals and consultant job planning, please.
So thank you very much, Eileen. I'm conscious people trying to hear on the screen as well. I've got 4 or 5 points I want to draw out, and obviously, Catherine, if I can draw you in around job planning as well at the end. And obviously, one of those points will be around appraisal. Just a point of clarity around Pri's report. We talk about mandatory training. Mandatory training itself, we're above targets, and actually we do incredibly well. Mandatory training for role, we're slightly below target. And as Jackie and I think Mike just alluded to, we were referring to the March report when I was reporting May data into June data. So there have been some shifts, positive shifts there as well. So in my report, just to draw out quickly, and there's a lot of information in it, there's been a national review of job profiles. We have responded as an organisation. I think it's really, really important that we do. That may well have an impact on us. So there's a big piece of work around review of job descriptions and banding, etc., as a consequence of that. So we just need to be aware of that. As I say, we'll wait the outcome of that national review. Shaping our future together, again, I think it's a really important piece of work that we just need to make board aware of. And again, we discussed it in a bit more detail at the People and Culture Committee, but really just to say there are 3 outstanding elements to that piece of work. The ED&I team have met recently to finalise the ED&I strategy. It's sort of first iteration. Talent management strategy workshops are going to be ongoing during August and September across the organisation as we develop our talent management strategy. But that will also be aligned to both regional and also national requirements as well. And then finally, our leadership programme is going to be reviewed over the next 3 months. We've got 3 sort of core leadership programmes, which Scott's alluded to already. And again, we'll be going out across the organisation just as sort of a bit of a refresh to make sure it's fit for purpose. We have made our management first 100 days mandatory. There is now a bit of a push around, do we as part of that review want to look at compassionate action, leadership and the management courses mandatory as well as you sort of develop as part of that talent management. So that'll be part and parcel of the sort of the formal review. Just a couple other points to pull out. The TSS break glass shifts. You'll see there's an interesting balance there between, we're still seeing significant number of break glass shifts within the medical sort of area, within sort of nursing. You'll see in June come down to our lowest level for the last 4 years, which again is incredibly positive. And then finally, appraisals. We had a very detailed and lengthy discussion last week of appraisals. It's now at 72%. People who actually are starting their appraisal is about another 10% on top of that. But even so, it still remains a challenge across the organisation. Positively, we have gone up since December last year significantly, but it's not at the pace that we would want. We are waiting back for the RSM audit. And again, once we get that, we'll look at that. We've been working with them. And again, some of the initial feedback is there's a sort of a mixed approach around sort of setting objectives. And what they're talking about is SMART objectives, etc. And what will be helpful is to get into some of that detail to understand the quality of appraisal, not just the numbers that are flowing through. In the discussion last week, there was it's fair to say there was a sort of a carrot and stick approach around that we still need to be pushing the benefits of appraisals. We need to be encouraging staff. We are having some good feedback on the appraisals and the appraisal process. On the other hand, we still know that there are some resource issues and some challenges, and certainly some of our corporate teams are seeing high turnover, a significant number of vacancies. And what we're saying is, do you need some additional support from us in order to actually do your appraisals and give a bit more focus there as well? The other final bit is that we're actually looking at, can we do a slightly different version, not around the appraisal itself, but actually how we support the manager to do that. So not just a single manager covering 20 people, but actually can we fly some additional support in order to do that as well. I'm going to stop there and bring Catherine in just to talk about job planning.
Yeah, sure. So we now have the Medical Job Planning Consistency Committee, which is fully operational. And through that, we're running business as usual job planning for individual job plan requests for consultants, and that's all proceeding very well. We also run through that committee the programme of work to improve our rate of completion for job planning, and that's a big piece of work that is benchmarking against the internal audit from last year. And we've made significant progress in reviewing the process and the guidance, so we've now linked the process much more clearly to joint service level job planning with operational colleagues and teams, and also linking the process to appraisals so that we continue to get good completion on our appraisals as well, but also to make sure that job plans ultimately are in line with trust objectives and service objectives. The completion rate, so we've had a push on asking consultants to complete their job plans. We've completed some revised guidance that is now in its final draft form, and I think we'll be ready to go out in the next week or so, and that should help things. But we are not where we would like to be. We're not on target for what we predicted for consultants completing their job plans on the system, and that largely is due to capacity issues. So it's due to capacity issues across the board, I would say. Capacity of consultants to do the piece of work and prioritise it, capacity of our clinical leadership to sign off on the job plans. So we have the job plans, NHSE guidance is clear. They have to be ultimately signed off by the doctor's line manager, and we have limited clinical leadership posts that are able to sign those job plans off currently. And also limited by capacity within our medical staffing support services to support with those joint service level job plan. So those are the reasons really, and it's just been a case of where this piece of work sits in trust priorities and how our clinical leaders in particular prioritise this piece of work. I think that's as best an update as I can give really.
Thank you, Catherine. Any questions for Stephen or indeed for Free beyond those? Brian.
Can I just raise a couple of things? I think it's interesting on this slide number, page 72 in the deck. It shows the targets that have been in place at the level. So obviously since the start of the year and where we actually are, and we're still quite a way away. And I suppose the question is whether those targets are still realistic and need to be revised. But at the same token, I think we've got to make sure that all of the actions that are taking place really deliver against these and actually having monthly targets. So if we have to get to see and we're currently 60 for the sake of argument, if that's a 3-step process, can we not set that as a target by month and then report against that target by month? Because the problem sometimes with bigger numbers and longer distances and achievement means that nothing gets done or it doesn't get done as quickly as it might do. So I don't know whether there's some value in that. And so that's kind of part one. And part B is just when you look at appraisal rates by directorate, corporate's the one which is the worst performer, closely followed by research, I should say. So is that something that can be more easily achieved than can be achieved, say, in some of the clinical directorates where maybe more complex because of location or function?
Yeah, if you want to start and everything, Mike.
So I do like the notion. I'm just revisiting the target in the context of that sort of monthly breakdown. I think we should still set us a challenging target. I mean, it's fair to say there was a bit of a national debate ongoing around appraisals at the moment. Certainly through our sort of HRV WhatsApp group, there's been a bit of a conversation around, targets and who's doing what and what's the quality and that sort of thing, and just trying to drive some of this forward. I mean, in relation to corporate services, I think it is also fair to say, though, that through the vacancy control process, it is the area where we've held the most vacancies and we've really pushed them and really asked them to actually look at, do they need certain posts? I mean, Free in her report spoke very much around the L&OD team. We've had a significant number of posts that we've either paused, that we've now switched on. So, for example, I've got 3 management posts. We've only got 1 person in those management posts at the moment. So I think there's a bit of a resource issue, but we are switching some of that back on. That also leads to that, can we put in some additional support in order to help and drive that forward as well? So it's not an excuse, Brian, but it's also just trying to recognise we've got some of those challenges.
Sorry, just a checking question, if you don't mind, which is that are you measuring appraisals then against the posts or against the people in the posts?
At the moment, it's against posts.
So that's so that we can never achieve targets then.
That's why.
So until we get that data squared, not realistic potentially.
Yeah, that's why there was a bit of a piece of work again in the sort of around data cleanup doing, and also that's why we've got that 100% ratio. We have anywhere between 95 and 90%. And again, there's a bit of a national conversation around that as well.
I think that's the first time I've heard that.
Was learning everything. Mike, come in.
Yeah, so it's around bank and agency use and spend. I've asked about that. I understand it's about when we use it, 100% agency, 20% bank. Bank is more expensive than agency. And I'm just, the other way around, is it? I'm so sorry. That's, beg your pardon. Anyway, the point I wanted to make is that's one of the big drivers, as I understand it, of our financial problems. And it may be that Lauren might comment on that later when we come to the financial recovery plan. But I just wanted to catch that as something that I ask about, which I think is an important issue. And obviously, I've got other issues around using agency at bank as well, with regards to understanding policies and how we work. But it was the money side of it, which was particularly.
Yes. Sorry, Mark, I'm being slightly distracted. Are you all right there?
I am.
Sorry.
I'm just going to step outside for a moment. For my story.
Sorry.
All right. And the thing I would note on use of agency is there are some areas where our use of agency is entirely predictable and it's stubborn, and we kind of need to do something about actually addressing the fact that there's always going to be a need for clinical input into some of these areas of provision. And just wouldn't it be better if it was all said through having members of staff than having to rely on agency? And I know it's difficult. There's no need to.
That's exactly what we do. Challenge whoever is finding substantive problems.
And I.
It's one of these unfortunate market circumstances, if you will.
Yeah, but I chair the consultant panels. So I know when we run them, and I know when we're not able to run them. So I say that mindful it's difficult, but I do think, given that some of these areas and geographies are difficult, that we need to have a super push, right, and be really creative about types of contracts that we're willing to offer to get people to come and do them. That's all I'm saying.
Steve's desperate to come in.
No. I think so. Look, I mean, I think there's work that Kathy and others are doing around sort of consultant roles in order to try and drive exactly what you're saying about Island Right bringing more people in. In relation to our bank, Mike, it's a slightly different bank than say CUH in the context of the majority of our bank is our staff. So actually, it's our staff coming back into the organisation. So obviously they know the policies, procedures to training, etc. And then bank and the agency element for non-medical. Again, the majority of those actually are people that regularly work agency within CPFT, and they're just like the flex, which again I think is quite interesting. If you talk about non-medical, we've seen that come down significantly from an agency perspective. As I say, our biggest area at the moment is that medical element, and still trying to sort of really draw in consultants, etc. And again, as I say, colleagues, medical colleagues are looking at that.
All right. Any more before we move on? In which case, let's move to the Business and Performance Committee Assurance Report. Jane not with us today, but Lauren, do you want to speak to this? That's okay.
Yeah, happy to, Jane. Thank you. So I'll take the report as read, just draw out a couple of areas. So you'll note there are no areas to alert committee support today, but there were a few areas to advise where there's partial assurance noted from the discussion in the committee. I'll hold the operational performance report because we do have that substantively as a separate board item. But in terms of the other areas, you'll notice a few coming up of just a flag. So still a high volume of data activities that we have on our risk register, and a high volume of FOIs that we receive as an organisation. But with both, there's ongoing focus, and we've got a better sort of business as usual rhythm in terms of addressing that higher level that we see. TWIB, the Trustwide Improvement Board, it's referenced here, it's also referenced on the BAF, but just to draw out for the meeting, it's slightly reshaped, I guess would be the best way of describing it. So we now have a CPFT external improvement board that feeds through to. So it looks at the overall improvement plan as well as efficiencies and transformation areas. So there was some discussion at the last committee around that and how we use that as an internal improvement vehicle for all areas. Additional digital focus, that's an area for us that we're particularly thinking about at the moment. There was quite a significant discussion at the last committee. With thanks to Steve as our new associate Ned, who will be helping support our focus on that over the next year. I think we've made some reference to it already today, but it is an area of opportunity for us. both in terms of consolidation, but also pushing on in terms of advancement and how we use that to improve our productivity, make use of best technologies. The other area I might draw out is the reference in the health and safety committee to the violence, aggression and reduction meetings. And there's a discussion that has been happening, because was happening feeding into that meeting and has been happening since, about which forums we use for those conversations internally. So there has been an agreement to merge temporarily as a pilot, see how well it works, that group, but with a pre-existing group which related to use of force. So we've got a few forums that do similar things, but to bring them in one place to ensure that we've got best attendance and a regular rhythm of that, and that we can keep the focus on this as an organisation, because it's a key area for us in terms of both the therapeutic impact for patients, but their experience in terms of restrictive environment and so forth. There was one area of good practice noted, and I guess I'd just take the chance to highlight that. But the capital plan, in terms of the engagement it's had and the route that it's taken to be compiled, and noting that the Business Performance Committee actually saw that, I think, 3 times, one sort of before the start of the year and then twice in the year, as the planning process has continued in the broader NHS, and we've agreed that total plan with other system partners, but also as internally we continue to reprioritise in terms of patient safety, broader projects, but also core kind of backlog maintenance that we need to do to keep our estate where it is.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. Any questions at all for Lauren before we go to Holly? Operational performance. So Holly, if you're good voice, good hair.
Thank you. I'll take the paper as read, but just wanted to put out a few points of interest. The first is around right to care, right person. Just to say that we have implemented phase 2, so that went live on the 16th of this month, and that is around absent without leave and walkouts from a hospital setting. So we're monitoring the impact of that. As yet, we've had no concerns around that, and continue to have really good engagement with our police colleagues. And we're currently working on phase 3, which is around section 136 patients and conveyance to and from places of safety. We're expecting that to be a little bit more challenging, bearing in mind we only have one section 136 suite, but again, really good engagement with our acute and police colleagues, and that's work that's being led by the ICB. Want to mention out of area placements, and obviously that's of interest both from a sort of quality, safety and experience perspective, but also from a financial perspective. We are seeing an improvement in our out of area placement position. So for example, as of today, we have 16 out of area placements. 8 of those are appropriate, so environments that we don't provide within our services, and 8 of those are inappropriate. So the significant work is being continued with notes to both the directorate, but also to Asha, who is leading our patient flow work, because we are seeing some sustained improvements. We do still have some work to do to ensure that all of our data aligns, and that actually all of our different systems, both sort of operational and financial, are aligned. So we are continuing to work with colleagues around that. Out of our 7 nationally mandated indicators, we met 6 of those. The target that we were below was for entering treatment with the talking therapist service. It's the first month that has been below target, so it's currently not statistically relevant, but we will be keeping an eye on that to understand if that continues. I thought people might be interested in terms of following Venkat and Claire's board story around children's ADHD, just to sort of highlight our position in terms of adults with ADHD and autism. And people will be aware that that's nationally of interest, but it's also really relevant to us as an organisation, because it's an area where we're seeing increasing weights. So for ADHD, in the past year, we've seen that waiting list increase by 40%. And for autism, in the last year, we've seen that increase by 27%. The ICB are being very supportive in terms of linking with us to understand how they can help manage that waiting list. But it's obviously an area of significant concern for us, both for the people on the waiting list, but also for the team that is trying to sort of work through that, which is challenging. In terms of other waiting lists to note, OPAC have seen a decrease in people waiting for mental health services, and in particular those waiting for memory assessment services. So that's a really good piece of continued quality improvement work. However, within our older people's and community services, we are seeing a really significant increase in terms of demand for our physical health services, particularly for podiatry and community rehab. So again, we're looking at those services just to understand, are there any sort of efficiencies and productivity gains we can make, but also linking in with ICB colleagues so that they too can understand that demand. I'm happy to take any questions. Sorry, that was a rattle.
Very lovely there. Scott, you wanted to...
Yeah, just to add one bit on the paper, it does make reference to the Health and Child Programme. Yeah. So there's an ongoing conversation with ourselves and our colleagues in CCS. So just to remind everyone, the Healthy Child Programme is, to all intents and purposes, a joint venture between ourselves, CCS, the what's known as the Section 75 arrangement with authorities. As you know, the local authorities, both Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, are kind of separating. And what they're looking to do is ideally still commission a similar service. From their perspective, as I interpreted it, they would like to see the existing model prevail into a new arrangement, and that new arrangement would have to be in place from the 1st of April 2025. So we're currently working through with CCS how to effect that. Suffice it to say, it's not exactly a comfortable stroll in the park. CCS have pretty strong views about how they would like to see the service being run, as do we. We've had challenges working effectively as a partnership, some of which should have been addressable, but for reason that hasn't been the case. So as I say, it's a somewhat fraught discussion at times. To be quite candid here, we have a session with the local authority directors of public health scheduled for Thursday afternoon, tomorrow afternoon, on this very point. So try and keep the board posted on that. But our clear intention is to continue to support the programme as fully as we possibly can. But to say that we have different views that seem to be emerging and, let's say, even crystallising more formally as to how the service should be run from April onwards.
We will obviously keep a watching brief on that. Holly, could I just ask you to talk through a couple of things? About Mulberry. One question about Mulberry. When, if we're going to get that capacity brought into play? And then the other question I've got is in the data pack, but it's about the diabetes service in the north of the county and how we don't have the consultants on our books, they sit with another NHS trust. But the data is suggesting that there are no consultant appointments available for type 1 diabetes until 2025, which, just from thinking about the people we serve, and type 1 diabetes being a pretty significant and impactful condition, seems astonishing. I can't think of a better word than astonishing. So Mulberry's and type 1 diabetes access to consultants.
Yes, happy. I'll start with Mulberry, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So obviously, as part of reopening Mulberry 3, we'd agreed on 3 phases. So phase 1 was to open 6 beds, which we have done. Phase 2 was to increase that to 10 beds. And we agreed, along with our nursing colleagues, what level of substantive staff needed to be in place for us to safely do that. And we've been working towards recruiting those substantive staff. So we're currently, and I know it sounds a very small number, but 1.7 whole-time equivalents away from being able to implement phase 2. The team are hopeful that we will, we've got recruitment events going on currently, allowing for sort of onboarding time, training, etc. We are hopeful that we might be able to open those additional beds at the end of September, beginning of October, and we will then work on phase 3, which will be reopening to the full 16. And again, that's just about supporting additional staffing and making sure that we've got training in place.
Just to note, paper says that recruitment's taking place in June, on the cusp of August.
So recruitment did take place in June. That was not successful. So we've put on additional training. The directorate are working very closely with members of Stephen's team in terms of looking at how are we advertising, how are we trying to make this an attractive environment, looking at, we've linked in with the RCN, we've re-looked at our social media with Chris and his colleagues' teams. But I think it's fair to say it's a challenging environment, particularly in the south, for recruiting mental health practitioners.
All right, well, let's do diabetes.
George, I think Steve was.
Sorry, just to say, I think, can we triangulate that a bit with, Pre's paper? So clearly, we spoke about Regulation 18, and this is where we want to maintain compliance with Regulation 18. So that's sort of issue there. I mean, I think there's a broader issue around, and again, just cross-referencing from my paper, we're finding it's easier to cover bank, agency, etc. in the north. We are in the south, for example, and some of those around sort of accommodation. So we are beginning to think about, is there a broader issue around the system supporting us around accommodation, etc.
Okay. All right, diabetes.
Diabetes and in particular the type 1 pathway in the north. So as you correctly highlighted, Eileen, we've had significant difficulties with our subcontracting arrangement with NWAFT. So we subcontract consultant provision for our type 1 diabetic service in the north. We in fact have issued a performance notice and are currently in a series of meetings with NWAFT, looking at how we can improve the consultant provision to those to that patient group. I have highlighted to the ICB my concerns around NWAFT's ability to deliver the level of service that we are looking for those patients. And so we will be reaching out to some other providers just to understand whether there are alternatives to NWAFT providing that consultant provision.
Thank you. Brian, and then Mike.
If I may, just on that diabetes point, I think that was one of the issues that was raised in the which is obviously in full review of the ICB and others, and so clearly it's in the spotlight, and I think try to do is to encourage whatever resources we can get to that service, because clearly it looks like we're being let down by our system partners. So I support your the actions that you're taking, but we shouldn't take our eye off the ball in this period.
Mike.
Thanks, Holly. Just two quick things. One is there anything to update which came out of the rapid policy review meeting is now being followed up with the ICB around access to ECT at Addenbrooke's in the south of the county? That was, I understand, stopped, and therefore we don't have a service in the south, we only have a service in the north. And the second was, to what extent the delayed transfers of care, is there any leverage there in terms of reducing our out of area placements? Because looking at the data, there's only 12 on this graph, but half of them are waiting more than 3 months. I just wondered if you had something to say about both.
Yes,
Yeah.
happy to. So ECT is being kept on the monitoring list for the rapid policy review meeting. However, we're going to discuss that through our assurance meetings with the ICB, which we've got this afternoon. So that's one of the things that we're asking for their support in terms of looking at service specification and helping us liaise with CWH in terms of that service. So I can update following the meeting this afternoon. And then in terms of delayed transfers of care, so again, as part of the inpatient flow work, the Directorate have been doing a lot of work to sort of understand how many patients we've got that no longer require our medical care and attention, but actually do still require an element of care, either social care or housing. So housing is a big issue for us. We've agreed that will remain on the improvement agenda, which has local authorities present. We have reached out to both local authorities, and actually they are now meeting with us quite regularly to understand the issue and see how we can support. I think it's fair to say that there will be specific housing that we know we don't have enough of, and so that will be back to local authority colleagues to ask how they're going to commission what we require to meet individuals' needs.
It's 22 today, not 12.
Yes, I was thinking, gosh, they have really worked hard.
Catherine, did you want to come in?
Yeah, can I just come in about ECT? To add to what Holly said. So our ICB medical director specifically asked that we help appraise some of the population needs around ECT, and we've done a piece of work with one of our public health registrars. Catherine Faulkner's current registrar has drafted a paper just to really articulate the population health needs around ECT and the gaps in the south, and that will go on to inform around the options for ECT, which include boosting the current provision from the north, or providing an outreach service from the north, or reinstating within the south, or something indeed much more fully fledged, which might incorporate a fuller suite of neuromodulation options, including RTMS.
And just a reminder that we do actually still provide a service.
Absolutely.
It just happens to be located in the north.
I understand that.
In the south is the issue. And if I link it back to the conversation that Catherine and Stephen and I were having with EBU colleagues yesterday afternoon, the board meeting I referred to, we're now trying to assert that the EBU should be prioritising what are the key areas for investment and support from a mental health perspective in a much more ground-up way, system point of view, as opposed to that kind of binary bilateral between the provider and the commissioner. And RTMS and ECT are both on that list. So, as Catherine said, working up the paper could give us a much more forceful sense of focus around the importance of having that being delivered equitably from a capacity point of view.
Thank you. And that will be captured either here or through the ICB.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that's an offshoot of having that EBU centred focus is we need to respect the governance around individual organisations, again, provider as well as commissioner, to make sure that people are signing that off, but the sense of prioritisation should be set by the people who actually know what they're talking about. I'm not disrespecting people around this table, he says he's in.
Thank you very much.
Holly, thank you. Clearly, lots to do and still remaining lots of challenges. We're encouraging to see progress against most of the targets where we are performing incredibly well. It's very easy to focus on things where it's a bit more challenging, but let's celebrate the fact that we are against a number of indicators. But we always come back to the fact we must do our very best for those that we serve. And if that means making a bit of noise about services in places where we need them, then we should not be shy about doing that. Okay, thank you. So I think then, Lauren, we move to you for the finance report.
So I'll take the report as read again. Just to know, I guess a few points for me to draw out. So in terms of where we are year to date, we're slightly behind plan, £160,000 behind plan in the first 3 months of the year. So it pretty much means we're on track, but noting that that was a planned deficit at this point in the year of 3.6 million. So colleagues be aware that you know, we were mindful about our recovery journey. We set out a stretching recovery trajectory for us as an organisation, but we were always cognizant that in the early part of the year we would still have a partial trading deficit. Just in terms of key factors in there has been some discussion already about the out of area placements, but that's £300,000 overspent year to date. As at sort of last month reported, it was a much higher volume than Holly just discussed. Actually, we've halved the number of patients that have been treated in out of area locations, and so we're hopeful in terms of obviously both the quality improvements that gives the patients the experience, but also seeing some of that financial benefit come through over July and future months. I'd note that whilst we're slightly behind in our efficiency plan, we have delivered £2.3 million worth of efficiency in the first 3 months of the year, and that is a significant shift for us as an organisation. Definitely, we need to continue the focus on this as we progress through the year. We know that sort of more plans come online, but that is a big shift for us. I think that's a lot for us to deliver in the first few months of the year, and a real thank you to colleagues for what we have delivered to date. And then for us, I guess, the need to continue that very live and active focus, and where we've got known slippage with plans, the need to continue to identify alternative schemes so that we continue to deliver that break-even plan that we've set and agreed with system partners. I'll just make one comment on capital, which is referenced in the report, but we spent about £750,000 on capital so far in Q1. That does look like a low number when you see it in the context of the overall plan, and is slightly behind plan. Not to be concerned about at this point, just to assure colleagues. So as I've described, the planning, we have many iterations of the planning process, for the final planning signed off on the 12th of June. So some of that will be as we're still working through planning. And it's also a product of being slightly behind plan on leases. So when we enter into a new lease, we capitalise the whole lease, and the phasing of that can skew the plan because it's a significant number when it happens. And we do have leases that we're working towards renewing for this year, which will shift. If I can just answer the earlier point, Mike, about agency staffing and interim staffing. So, you know, we do use, you see reflected in the reports, slight overspend on staffing where we're dependent on temporary staffing as opposed to substantive. Just in terms of how we work that internally, we plan for substantive staff. So in terms of your local budgets as a manager and so forth, you will have a plan to hire permanent staff. And so you're very much encouraged to do that. But we're mindful that, you know, where we can't hire those staff, we will need to use bank and agency staff to make sure there's absolute delivery of care and that's not disrupted. So the plan is for substantive staff, but we're leaning on others. What I would just draw out, medical was an area of particular challenge for us last year, where we were dependent on, I guess, a few key agency members of staff, but at an individual level, they're at significant cost. What I would say is we're seeing that come down. So already at month 3, we've seen that taking a downward trajectory, which is one of the big efficiency areas and continues within our plan, noting that there's a lot of work to do in that space to maintain that and to ensure that we can recruit high quality consultants to our roles and retain them. But that is trending down. And I would say also in the context that, mindful you see it a bit in month 4, but we were impacted by industrial action in month 3. So even allowing for the industrial action, actually we see the agency dependency coming down as that medical cohort.
I mean, I know it's too early to ask, but I'll ask it anyway. In terms of pay awards,
so I guess we're waiting for a formal internal communication within the NHS. I am actively reading following the articles and the news updates, as are others. We are hopeful of it being funded, but we haven't got that complete clarity yet. And what I would just note as a caveat, without being too pessimistic, even when it's described as fully funded, it doesn't, how the calculations run at a national level and what it means for us as a local organisation has historically always given us a gap. So I'm very hopeful of full funding, but even with full funding, I anticipate that will give us a challenge. We know the recent consultant award gave us a pressure, which we were still in discussions with the system about. But for example, Agenda for Change last year, which was a much lower pay award and was noticed to be fully funded, you'll recall, colleagues, that gave us a £1.2 million internal pressure. So I am very pleased with staff, albeit it may be that we have further efficiency stretch that we need to address as an organisation. But I know these negotiations are still active.
Still live, more to come, I suspect, but anyway, we'd be remiss not to at least mention it in dispatches. Okay, any questions for Lauren? Lauren, thank you. Thanks to the team behind you who so hard to get us to a position where we are today, and then thanks to everybody who is supporting the work of getting grip on efficiencies. Yeah, it's encouraging to see some of the right things being gripped. Brian, can we move to you?
Yes, thank you. So, audit committee, I think since we last met, we signed off the various end review reports that's on the annual report and various others that go off to different parts of the site world, I suppose. I think it's a huge amount of work goes into that, and I think we should thank the many individuals involved from the different parts of the organisation who are involved, because it's really needed to achieve that. So those were all signed off in line with the timetable for the NHS before the end of June, which is a very positive thing. We haven't always achieved that before. The audit process, the external audit process was, I think it's fair to say, comprehensive. The rules changed a bit in terms of the amount of work required by the external auditors, but we all managed to get over the line on time and with no qualifications in the report. So that's a real positive for us. I think on internal audit, again, we've had a very comprehensive internal audit program over the course of the year. In the end, we were marked on versus previous years in terms of the overall quality, and that was largely around the medicines management report, which Mike has referred to earlier on. And we're clearly a lot of work has gone into addressing the issues that were raised in that. And so those will be the remaining points, and that will be resolved, and we'll be able to move forward much more positively. The idea of a poor internal audit report, clearly it's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, we'd rather it was better, but by the same token, it also proves that the process is operating well, and the value that comes back from that clearly does improve quality across the organisation. So I think that's the kind of the yin and the yang of that. And then finally, I think it was also reassuring, as ever, we have very strong support on certainly quality the anti-fraud and so on requirements that we have in the trust are very well managed and maintained, and we shouldn't forget that there are some things that we do very well indeed. So
Thank you, and thank you, Brian, for all the work you put into that committee. It's really important. It is really important that we are learning from, internal audit is often something that's poorly understood. We're paying people to give us advice on things where we can improve, and that's the spirit in which we can take it. And clearly, we are doing around this one particular area. Any questions at all for Brian? Okay, in which case, sorry, Lauren.
Not a question as such, but if I might, I think it's the first public board since we have the accounts signed off. But just a big thank you to the finance team. It is a small team of fewer than sort of 20 members for most of that year end. So to know the way in which they worked with the auditors to get the trust in this position.
Brilliant. Thank you. Stephen, trust business plan.
Thank you very much, Chair. So just going to take the report as read, but just to say from a governance perspective, we received the guidance in March this year. Normally you get the guidance, so your operational sort of business plan prior to Christmas. So it gives you an indication of the report normally, and the plan would normally come sort of in April or May time. So it's slightly later than usual. So I just wanted that noted. This is a summation of our operational business plans across each of the directorates. That includes corporate colleagues. And again, I'd just like to thank Nikki Brooks-Smith and Louise Stimson for their sort of work on this, and also engagement across the organisation as a whole. The plan itself then really focuses on the 24-25, very much on a sort of an efficiency theme, given where the organisation was when we started this and will continue to be. But at the same time, still focusing on sort of the quality and safety and the patient experience and also obviously focusing significant sort of resource around sort of recruitment and retention of staff as well. Just to say, it aligns to both the joint forward plan, the ICB joint forward plan, the ICS, and also sort of the overarching strategy as well. And there's a couple of appendices in there as well around sort of, sort of plan on the page. And again, those, it aligns to sort of priorities as set out in the directorate and plans as well. Finally, today, this has been through the executive and also at our strategy away day as well. We reviewed it again, and it's also been to BMP where it was signed off pending a number of small changes as well. Step and take any questions. I'm asking the board to sign this off today.
Okay, Stephen, I have provided some detailed feedback, I think, on things where I think just tweak it a bit to be a little more positive. But any questions, Brian?
So just one point really, which inevitably I go to the numbers. In the efficiency plan section C, on page 1636, it sets out efficiency categories, and I know that we have a lot of detail that underpins all of the numbers that are in here. But I just wonder, in terms of financial reporting going forward, is it worth just putting a section in using these same headings so that we can easily relate our targets against what we've set versus where we are here? Because I think we need to be consistent. This is a live working real document. I think we should try to use it in a constructive way. So of course, it's likely helpful that in terms of reporting, but just in terms of format.
Yeah, we're bringing it to be under those headings, so we can certainly do that. Just find it helpful.
Just adding, we do talk a lot about efficiency, which is right. That's about making best use of resources. We make best use of resources to deliver the very best people that we serve. And I think I don't want to give the impression, or for our staff to get the impression, that the only thing we're interested in is being efficient for efficiency's sake. What we are doing is trying to make the very best use of the resources available to us to deliver safe, effective and high quality care, make sure the money gets to the right place. I would just ask that we make sure that we are clear, consistent in that messaging around the balance we're trying to strike here. Lots of nods, but we can do it, because I can't tell you how many visits I go out where our staff will say that they feel I'm going to an elegant word for this, but somehow the efficiency is trumping the real and present issues that they are dealing with, and that's a really unfortunate cloud to have hanging above people. Scott.
Yeah, I don't think anybody would disagree with that from a philosophical point of view or sense of intent. I have to say, when I talk about efficiencies, I live at that point, and rightly so, but I also need to remind colleagues that sadly, we're spending considerably more money than we actually have. We have an obligation to try and make sure that we live within our means. So you're absolutely right that we need to make sure that we're using the resources as best we possibly can in support of those that need our services and access our services. That's incredibly the case. So a lot of the efficiency stuff is very much about just can we reduce our costs. But you're right, maybe the messaging we haven't quite got the balance. Like going out doing up and stuff.
Frontline staff.
Yeah.
Of course, it's slightly different message, or they've taken a message that is somewhat different. I think we need to be clearer and sustained about what we're trying to correct. Our issue, all the issues about making sure that every pound goes towards making it more straightforward to do better by those that we serve. And the issue of whether we get money for the door is a discussion for another day. But as I talk about that at every meeting, I'm not going to do it today. I promised myself I wouldn't do. Lauren and then Rachel.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that there's always more for us to do on this, because as soon as you mentioned finances, we can become quite concerned. But what I would say is there's a really good level of congruence in the efficiency plans that we've got this year in terms of them actually driving quality improvements. So I think potentially Brian's suggestion to report under the headings is a really good direction to do that in more of a public space, because reducing out of area placements is not fundamentally about finances. It's about quality improvements for patients. Similarly, moving from consultants that are agency and locums are less familiar with our services to those that are substantive, is a big quality improvement for staff and for patients. So I think there's more for us to maybe do in that space. And similarly, that's the reason that our quality improvement board is in fact monitoring lots of this programme, because there are quality improvements which have a positive financial consequence. So I think, yeah, there's definitely something for us to reflect on there. But if you look at our programme, it is heavily weighted to things that are for the good of our patients and service users.
Lauren's covered what I was going to say, but I'd only add that that's why quality improvement needs to absolutely be from ground level up.
Excellent. Yes, sorry, Mike.
No, just to say, I could see research and innovation in the plan. A question was raised at quality and safety though, as to where R&D reports through up into the board. So to capture the question and not necessarily answer it now, but I think that will be a useful thing to know going forward as we monitor the plan.
I think we've all agreed that there is a reporting line for R&D, which comes through Kathy. But we do want to give much more prominence to research, development and innovation. And we need to think about how we can do that, both practically and structurally, to reflect how we are doing it.
Yes, it was really about, does it come directly from the board or quality and safety, or how does it work? And there may be an answer.
I think it touches many places, but that may be a function of why we're not
everywhere
pointy on where we want to be.
Kelly's got it in hand, and alongside it, we're also thinking about the self-same challenge. Don't have the formality of the.
Yeah, if it's everywhere, it's nowhere. Sort of thing.
All righty. Thanks so much for all the reports there. And thanks, Stephen, to you and colleagues for the work that you've been doing. We are signing off. But we can think about some of the wording as head back previously, but also on basis today. Is that all right with everybody?
Yes.
All righty. So Jackie, the charitable fund.
Yes. Thank you, Eileen. So we met only a couple of weeks ago. There was an advisory position for the board to look at, or the committee to look at, which was risk number item 4. And we discussed this at length and decided that actually we need to decouple this risk. It's got 2 risks in one. And there has been significant progress on what is a processing issue and a recharging issue. And the other issue is the pursuit of unrestricted funds, really. And there was a very deep conversation about the unrestricted funds and how we can support Hannah and her team to make sure that they can focus on that productively. And we also got into the conversation about actually having a little bit more information around all the good work they're doing on sort of supporting the team to understand where they're going to get funds from. So they're putting in lots of bids, putting in lots of effort, and we wanted to make sure that we could support them by seeing that pipeline of effort and seeing what the outcomes are that will then give us a sense of, you know, what's the percentage that we actually achieve in getting a fund agreed or not. So there's that part of it. Hannah is also wanting to work with myself and Mike and other committee members to think about what is the one thing, what is the one piece of strategic fundraising for the charity that really brings it alive and connects it to the organisation strategy. So we've set ourselves that little challenge as well. And I think in general, it was well recognised by the committee, the really great work that is done by the charity for patients and carers and our staff, and at a real operation granular level, it is really welcomed. Even though it's only maybe a few £100 here, it is really seen as a massive positive. So I'd just like to thank Hannah for her team for all the hard work they're doing, and we will continue to work. And it's great to have Mike on board for his first meeting, I think it was, who comes with a wealth of experience. So welcome, Mike, to the committee.
Well, and thank you, chairing it.
So Head to Toe continues to be a smaller charity than we like. And we want to do, I've said this before, we need to challenge ourselves to think, how can we support this charity so that it can do even more to support patients, those that care for them, and indeed our staff. So we do need to really focus on how we can leverage something that has been sustained, and not all charities can be sustained. So ours has sustained itself, and the next part of its journey is to get to a slightly larger size. So we want to work with the committee to do that. But yes, to echo your thanks to Hannah and the team, they are outstanding. Lauren.
If I might, Chair, just whilst we're in a public board, just give a shameless plug to the Head to Toe bike ride that takes place in August, and encourage all listeners to get involved with that, because it's a great event. It's a real opportunity to talk for our wonderful city, but also to help support our brilliant charity and therefore our staff and patients.
It's a week on Sunday, Lauren.
Cambridge North Station.
I never got my stabilisers on. I'm not going to give anyone on that, but it is brilliant. So that. All right, we now move into the part of the meeting which was very exciting for me when I asked about whether we've used the second seal, and we haven't. These last 2 months, so we can put that one by. So only remains me to ask whether there's any questions that anybody hasn't been able to ask today that remain burning with them that they would like to ask before we allow at least some of you to go and enjoy the sunshine that is prevailing outside. In which case, can I say an enormous thank you to everybody who joined us this morning. Since we began, I've gathered from my daughter that the UK has won 2 gold medals. I have no idea in what sports. I am still, Nora, celebrating the fact that Ireland won a gold medal last night, which is really, in population terms, that's the equivalent of the UK winning 20. So, you know, excellent to have such joy brought to our lives. Right. Can we say goodbye to everyone who's on screen? Thank you so much. Catherine, we do have another session coming up. We'll try and get you an invite to that so you can stay with us. All right. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye.